Hi there, I'm Yang from China, and I'm going to teach you authentic Chinese home cooking in this course. Are you curious about Chinese cooking but don't know where to start? Have you been intimidated by those foreign sauces and ingredients? Or have you been held back by the thought that you need special equipment to cook Chinese food? Chinese cooking is not that complicated at all. Just like every one of you, most Chinese households don't have professional chef staff, and they use the same cooking pans and knives just like you. Cooking authentic Chinese food at home doesn't require much to start. In this course, I will first introduce you the 5 essential Chinese sauces. Then, we will use only these 5 Chinese sauces to cook 6 super tasty recipes with just your daily home cooking equipment. The 6 versatile recipe lectures work like a staircase, from easy to more complicated. After this course, you will be able to confidently cook a dinner full of authentic and tasty Chinese dishes, which you can enjoy with your family and friends. Enroll now and let's embark on this journey together to cook authentic Chinese dishes at home. Looking forward to seeing you in the lectures. Before tapping into the recipes, in this lecture, we're going to have a crash course on the key Chinese sauces. If you've ever visited a Chinese supermarket, you might have been overwhelmed by the racks of sauces, wondering what's in those bottles and jars and which one should I use. Don't be overwhelmed. Chinese cooking is not that complicated. We need only 5 key sauces to pull off most of the Chinese recipes. They are light soy sauce, dark soy sauce, Chinese dark vinegar, rice liquor, and sesame oil. Let's have a quick tour through each of them. Light soy sauce is made from fermenting soybeans. They provide a salty umami flavor and is the base flavor for many recipes. They are a light liquid with dark brown color, and they will give a light brown color coating to the dishes. Dark soy sauce is the sister of light soy sauce. They are also made from fermenting soybeans, but for a bit longer, carrying the same salty umami flavor, but they are a bit lighter in taste than light soy sauce. However, they carry a thicker texture than light soy sauce, and it's great for coloring the dishes to make the dishes look golden and shiny. Chinese dark vinegar. Unlike the Italian balsamic vinegar, the Chinese vinegar is made from carbs like rice or wheat, and you can tell from the name that it has a clear sour flavor. The dark vinegar is used a lot together with sugar to give the dishes a sweet and sour flavor. Moving on to rice liquor. They are literally cooking alcohol made from rice. It is probably one of my favorite cooking sauces. They are fragrant and really aromatic. It's usually used together with meat to remove the bloody and fishy smell from meat and seafood. And don't worry about getting drunk from rice liquor because the alcohol percentage is quite low, and also the alcohol will evaporate after some cooking. Last but not the least, sesame oil. The name is straightforward. Sesame oil is pressed out from roasted sesame. They have such a dominant roasted sesame flavor and smell. It has a very smooth texture and is used a lot as a final touch in dishes to elevate the depth of flavors. Yes, that's it. That's all you need to have to create most of the Chinese dishes. And I'm going to show you how in the next 6 recipes, using only these 5 Chinese sauces. Let's check out the recipes. Welcome back! From this lecture on, we're going to take out the pans and start cooking. To give you a very easy and smooth transition into Chinese cooking, we're going to start with this really simple recipe, scalded lettuce with garlic. Without further ado, let's start cooking. The ingredients needed for this recipe are really simple. A lettuce and 2 garlic cloves. That's it. First, we're going to disintegrate the lettuce leaf by leaf and then wash them. I would keep the lettuce leaves in their original shape without further cutting, because the bigger size of the leaves will remain more crunchiness during the scalding process, and also the nutrients would stay inside. After washing the lettuce, let's move on to mince the garlic. Here, we want to really mince the garlic into fine, tiny little pieces, because there wouldn't be too much cooking for the garlic later. You wouldn't want to bite into a big piece of raw garlic. After preparing both of the ingredients, let's make the sauce. What's the formula? 1 tablespoon of light soy sauce, 1 teaspoon of dark soy sauce, 1 teaspoon of vinegar, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 1/4 teaspoon of white pepper, 1/4 teaspoon of sugar, and 1/4 teaspoon of sesame oil. Stir it evenly and make sure the sauce mixes well. Put it aside and we'll use it for later. Let's move on to the stove. Bring a pot of water into boil. Add a few drops of olive oil into the boiling water. The olive oil will keep the color of the lettuce leaves green and shiny even after the scalding process. You can of course change the olive oil into other plant-based oil. They all work the same. Put in the lettuce leaves and scald them for around 1 minute, until the lettuce leaves are turning soft and even a bit transparent. You can adjust the timing to your own preference of how crunchy do you want the vegetable to stay, and also adjust it according to the different green vegetables that you are scalding right now. For vegetables that has more stem, like broccoli, then it takes much longer time. And for other leafy green veggies such as spinach, it will take like 30 seconds to be ready. Okay, time is up. Let's fish out all the lettuce. Make sure that you remove the excess water from the lettuce, and then put it nicely on a plate. Now, we can pour this dark sauce evenly over the lettuce. Put the minced garlic on top of the lettuce. And we're gonna move on to the final step of the recipe. Take out a small saucepan and pour in 1 tablespoon of plant-based oil. Heat up the oil. When you see smoke coming out from the pan and small oil stripes start to form, that means the oil is hot enough now. Now, carefully take this pan of burning oil close to our lettuce plate. Slowly but firmly pour the oil over the garlic. Listen to this sizzling sound. We're basically using the oil to cook the garlic instantly. Congratulations! Now we have our first recipe ready. Before eating, just stir the garlic around and make sure it mixes well with all the lettuce, and we can start eating. Enjoy! Welcome back! In this lecture, we're going to learn a quick and easy Chinese soup, tomato and egg soup. Let's start cooking. First of all, the ingredients. We want 200 grams of tomatoes, and preferably the juicy type, 2 eggs, and some coriander. You can also use chives or spring onion to your own preference. If you have it, you can also add a handful of dried shrimps. The dried shrimps will add a lot of sea flavor to our soup later. Now, let's start preparing the ingredients. First, the tomatoes. Remove the green knot on the tomato. Cut the tomatoes into irregular shapes, rather than slicing it or cut it into tiny little pieces, because this irregular shape gives out as much juice as possible while remaining a basic shape. Now, after cutting all the tomatoes, put it into a bowl and we will use it later. Moving on to the coriander. Very simple, just cut the coriander or chives into tiny little pieces. Put it into a bowl and we will use it for garnishing in the end. Now the eggs. Crack it open, then start whisking. I would only call the whisking down when you see little bubbles appearing on the top of the egg. See? Flavoring. A quarter teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of rice liquor, then whisk it again. The salt will help the eggs to shape in the cooking process, and the rice liquor removes this fishy smell of the eggs. In the meantime, boil around 800 milliliters of water, and we will use it for the soup. Now the tomatoes are done, the eggs are whisked, the coriander is minced, and the dried shrimps are there. Let's fire up. Turn on high heat. When the pan is hot, pour in a few grams of plant-based oil. When the oil is also hot, we can throw in the tomatoes. Gently stir the tomatoes for 1 to 2 minutes until the tomatoes are giving out the juice and becoming soft. Now it's time to add the boiling water. Make sure the water is abundantly covering the tomatoes because we are making a soup in the end. Also add in the dried shrimps if you have them. Bring the water to boil and continue cooking it for another 2 minutes until we see the soup color is gradually turning red. Now it's time to pour in the eggs. Slowly and gently pour in the egg along the side of the pan, in circles. Do not stir the eggs, just let the egg slowly form shape in the boiling soup. Garnish half of the coriander on top. When we see the eggs are not running anymore, that means it's time to stir. Some final flavoring before we call it done. Some salt to taste. Few drops of sesame oil. The sesame oil is really essential for this soup because it elevates the flavor so much. Now the soup is ready for plating. Pour it into a soup bowl. Then garnish with the remainder of the coriander or chives. Now our soup is ready. It's time to dig in. Welcome back! In this lecture, we're going to learn the most famous fried rice recipe, Yangzhou fried rice. Who doesn't love a bowl of freshly woked fried rice? Let's get started. There are quite some ingredients needed for this recipe. 80 grams of shrimps, 60 grams of Chinese sausage, 45 grams of peas, 35 grams of sweet corns, 4 dried shiitake, 2 eggs, 2 cups of rice, 2 spring onions. You can actually change the ingredients to your own preference. I'll elaborate a bit more on that in the next lecture. First, let's talk about how to cook rice. The most important thing about cooking rice is the ratio between the rice and water. For fried rice, we want to keep the ratio at 1 to 1, so that the rice cooked will be not too soft and sticky. Instead, they will become more friable during the wok process. I highly recommend you to invest in a rice cooker. It doesn't have to be fancy or expensive. The basic functions will do. The rice cooker will give us a worry-free cooking process. Also, it's very easy to clean afterwards with a non-stick layer. But also, it's perfectly fine if you're cooking with a normal pot with lid. We'll cover that later. Now, let's start cooking the rice. Measure 2 cups of rice and put it into a big bowl. Rinse it under running and cold water for 2 to 3 times. Make sure you remove the excess water and put it into the rice cooker or the pot that you're gonna cook the rice with. Now, measure the same amount of water and pour it into the pot. If you're using the rice cooker, just start the cooking process. If you are using a pot, then put the pot with the lid on the stove, bring the water to boil, then turn to the lowest fire that you can get, let it simmer for 15 minutes. Then the rice will be ready. When the rice is ready, gently stir the rice to make it loose and disentangle. Then put the rice in a big plate so that the rice is nicely spreaded on the plate. In this way, the excess heat, moisture and water will evaporate, and the rice base for our Yangzhou fried rice is prepared. Now, let's deal with the dried shiitake. After soaked in water for 60 minutes, the dried shiitake will be ready for use. So please plan this step ahead of time. Now, let's move on to do some cutting. First, the shrimps. Cut them in half, but if you have the smaller cocktail shrimps, just leave them as they are. Dice the Chinese sausage into small cubes. Put it aside. The shiitake are now soaked and soft. Also dice them into small cubes. We only need the green part of the spring onion. Cut them into small rings. Put it aside. The eggs. Crack them open. Then whisk it. Remember what we learned in our last recipe. Whisk the eggs until it's all foamy and bubbly on the top. Then we can start flavoring. A quarter teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of rice liquor, then whisk it again. Now that all our ingredients are prepared, let's fire up. Turn on the highest heat that you have. When the pan is hot, drip in a few grams of oil. Wait until the oil is getting really hot. Then, throw in the shrimps. Fry the shrimps until they change color. Note, don't overcook the shrimps, they are ready normally very soon. Spread some rice liquor along the side of the pan, so the shrimps are sizzling in rice liquor. This stimulates a lot of aroma. You will smell it. And it also removes the fishy smell of the shrimps. When the rice liquor is drying up a bit, take out the shrimps and we'll move on to the Chinese sausage. Throw in the Chinese sausage. Let it fry by itself until the fat comes out. When you see the Chinese sausage are a bit nicely burned and brown in its own fat, throw in the peas, corns, and shiitake. Stir fry them together for 1 to 2 minutes until they are cooked. One of the most important things while cooking fried rice is always keep the fire level on your stove to the highest. This will generate a nice burnt flavor around the ingredients, while the food is not burned at all. And this nice smell is what we call in Chinese 锅气 or vodka. This nice and indescribable smell is in essence when the water and moisture in the ingredients got steamed away instantly while reacting to the hot pan. The food got slightly caramelized and carry a nice burnt smell. And that is the essence of Yangzhou fried rice. Now again, pour in a few drops of rice liquor along the side of the pan. Let it sizzle in the pan, and it will stimulate a nice aroma. Take out the mix, and we will continue to the next step. Add in a few grams of oil so that the oil can lightly cover the bottom of the pan. Wait until the oil is really hot. Now we can pour in the eggs. After pouring the eggs, do not stir it. Wait for 10 to 15 seconds until the bottom of the egg is nicely fried. Then we can stir the egg. We want to make sure that all pieces of the eggs are cooked with a golden brown color. Now we can put in the rice. Gently mix the rice together with the egg and try to separate the rice even more. You will see with the high heat, the water in the rice will be steamed out even more and they will gradually fall apart. So it's all fluffy but not sticky. Now, let's throw in the earlier woked mix of Chinese sausage, peas, sweet corns, and shiitake. Stir them together with the rice and eggs. Throw in half of the spring onion rings into the mix and stir them well. so the spring onion flavor is nicely blended into the ingredients. Now, one of the last steps, let's throw in also the shrimps, stir together with other ingredients. Quickly add 2 spoons of light soy sauce. Stir, 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 so everything is nicely mixed under the high heat. I think by this time you are already smell a lot of flavors. Finally, some salt to taste. Make sure the salt is evenly blended in the fried rice. And now, turn off the stove, and we can take our fried rice onto a plate. Garnish with the rest of the spring onion rings, and our Yangzhou fried rice is ready. Look at the constant steam from the fried rice and smell it. That's the smell of guoqi. Let's dig in. Welcome back! In this lecture, we're going to cook the recipe steamed chicken with shiitake. This is a really popular dish that exists in various regional cuisines of China, just in slightly different formats. Let's start right away. The ingredients needed for this recipe are really simple. 300 grams of chicken leg without bones, 35 grams of dried shiitake, which after soaking, it turns to around 190 grams. Some colorful fresh chilies, which you can adjust to your own spicy tolerance level. 1 spring onion, around 4 centimeters of ginger. Before we start, we need to soak the dried shiitake for at least 1 hour. I always prefer using dried shiitake rather than fresh shiitake because the dried ones has a much stronger flavor that will infuse with the chicken. Don't throw away the water where the shiitake was soaked. We'll need it later. Now, let's start preparing the ingredients. Take the white and stem part of the spring onion. Cut it diagonally into big pieces. Cut the green part of the spring onion into small rings. Put them separately aside. The ginger. Remove the skin of the ginger and cut it into thin slices. Now, let's move on to the chicken leg. Cut the chicken leg into big cubes of around 3 centimeters. Don't cut the chicken leg too small because they will shrink after the steaming. Though I'm using the chicken legs with skin, it's also perfectly fine if you're using the ones without. Put the chicken in a big bowl, and now we're gonna learn how to marinate meat. This is the secret to keep the meat tender in Chinese cooking. Add 1 tablespoon of light soy sauce, 1 teaspoon of dark soy sauce, 2 teaspoons of rice liquor. Grind or add some white pepper, half a teaspoon of sugar, a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of sesame oil. Use your clean hand to mix the sauce with the chicken well. Massage the sauce into the chicken. This will help the flavors to go deep into the meat, and also it creates a layer with a mix of oil and sauces around the chicken, so this layer will protect the water and moisture inside of the meat from going out during the cooking process. Let the mix rest for 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, throw in half of the ginger that we cut earlier, also half of the white part of the spring onion. Mix them with the chicken. This is to rub in the flavors of ginger and spring onion into the meat. This removes the bloody smell of the meat. Remember the shiitake water that we kept earlier. Take 1 tablespoon into the mix. Massage the sauces and ingredients together. This flavored water replenishes the water loss of the chicken due to the earlier marinade with salt. This makes the meat stay tender and juicy. You can use ginger and spring onion soaked water or even just normal water. Different meat can absorb different amount of water. Normally beef can absorb a lot more water than chicken and pork. Add 2 teaspoons of starch into the mix. It can be cornstarch, potato starch, any starch that you have, and mix it well with the chicken. This will create a protective layer outside of the meat, which protects the meat juice from going out during cooking. Now, we can call the chicken marinated. You can apply this marinade method to beef or pork if you want the meat to stay juicy after cooking. Now, let's cut the shiitake. Cut the shiitake into big pieces because the shiitake will soak up a lot of water. After cooking, when you bite into it, a lot of juice will come out. Now the chilies. If you are a spicy lover like me, I have used 1 Thai chili to add the spicy flavor to the mix. Cut it into small pieces. I've also prepared 2 other fresh chilies, which are not very spicy. They will add a nice texture and color in the dish. Remove the seeds and cut them into small rings. Take out a bit of the chili mix and put them together with the green part of the spring onion. They will both be used for garnishing in the end. The rest of the chilies can go together with the rest of the spring onion and ginger for cooking. Now let's take a look at our marinated chicken leg. Throw in all the shiitake and the mix of the rest of the ginger, white part of spring onion, the Thai chili, and most of the colorful chilies. Stir and mix them evenly. Take out a plate with some depth and place the mix of chicken and shiitake evenly on the plate. Boil around 1 liter of water. Let's move on to do the steaming setup. I'm using the simplest setup. Take a big pot and put on a steaming rag. Pour in the boiled water. Bring it to boil again. Put the plate on the steaming rag. Close the lid and steam for 10 minutes. If you have a steaming device, feel free to use it. You can even use the steaming layer of your rice cooker, so your dish will be ready together with the rice. After 10 minutes, open the lid, stir around and flip side of the chicken and shiitake a bit, so all sides of the ingredients are evenly steamed. Close the lid and steam for another 10 minutes. Time is up! Take the plate out. Garnish with the green part of the spring onions and a bit of colorful chilies. Now our dish is ready. Take a look at the chicken. It's cooked but still juicy, tender, and very bouncy. The shiitake has soaked up a lot of juice. Let's bite into them. Welcome back! In this lecture, we're going to cook the recipe stir-fried pork belly with eggplant. Pork belly is probably the favorite type and part of meat for Chinese people. And after this recipe, you will understand why do we love pork belly so much. Let's get started. The ingredients needed are quite straightforward. 150 grams of pork belly, 1 eggplant, some fresh chilies to your own spicy tolerance level, some coriander, and a lot of garlic. I'm using 8 garlic cloves for this recipe. Let's prepare the ingredients. First, the eggplant. Cut them into long stripes of around 3 to 4 centimeters. There is a common perception that to cook eggplant we need a lot of oil, especially in Chinese cooking. However, we will learn a simple trick to cook eggplant with so little oil. Put the eggplant stripes in a big bowl. Add a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, mix it well, and let it sit for 10 minutes. By marinating the eggplant with salt, the excess water in the eggplant will come out and it will require really little oil to cook it later. Now, the chilies. First, cut the Thai chili into small rings. This is to add the spicy flavor into the stir-fry dish. We'll also cut some colorful chilies to add texture and color into the dish. Remove the seeds and cut them into thin stripes. Put them away and we will use it later. Moving on to the coriander. Cut the coriander or chives or spring onions into tiny pieces and we will use it for garnishing in the end. Now, the most important spice in this recipe, the garlic. We want to crush the garlic with the knife. Remove the garlic skin. and then cut them into small to medium-sized pieces. By crushing the garlic, we're breaking the fiber in the garlic naturally, so more garlic aroma will come out. And by keeping the garlic in considerable sizes, the garlic flavor will retain longer, because the garlic will be stir-fried for quite some time in this recipe, and its flavor will be able to infuse more with the other ingredients. Moving on to the pork belly. Cut it into thin slices, where in each slice, it's a mix of fat and muscles. In the pork belly that I bought, there is a small part where only fat is there. I separated it and cut it also into thin slices. Put it separately from the other pork belly. We will use the fat part to fry some lard later. Now that all the ingredients are prepared, let's fire up. Turn on high heat. It's better to use a non-stick pan in this case, because we're not going to add any extra oil except for using the lard fried out from the pork belly. Throw in the really fat part of the pork belly. Let it fry under the high heat. You will see the fat slowly coming out. Stir them around so the lard is lightly covering the bottom of the pan. Now throw in all the pork belly. Spread them on the pan. Let the lard fry itself out. Also stir it around once in a while so it doesn't get burned. Since we're only going to use the lard from the pork belly for cooking, so we really want to fry it nice and long so all the fat is coming out. When the pork belly and especially the fat is reacting to the really hot pan, there's a really nice smell coming out. Remember what we learned in the Yangzhou fried rice recipe? This is 锅气. When you see that the pork belly is slightly burnt, shrank a lot in size, and frying in its own fat, that means it's time to fish them out. Try to leave all the lard in the pan. The pork belly that I got this time actually doesn't have too much fat, but even that has generated enough lard for this recipe. Keep on the high heat. Throw in the garlic, Thai chili, and half of the colorful chilies into the pan. Stir fry them in the lard. It will smell a lot of garlic flavors coming out. Fry until the garlic turns a bit yellow or even burned on the corners. It's time to throw in the eggplant. See, after the salt marinade, the eggplant has already turned quite soft, and also there's some water coming out at the bottom of the pot. Mix the eggplant with the spices. It's all about stir frying, so just keep it moving and sometimes keep the mix lying on the pan and let the heat continue to soften the eggplant. Continue this process for around 3 minutes, depending on how hard the eggplant is. When you see that the eggplant is turning half soft, we can throw in the earlier fried pork belly. Mix them well. It's time to start the flavoring layer by layer. First, 2 tablespoons of light soy sauce. Stir fry evenly. This will give the most dominant flavor into the dish. Half a teaspoon of dark soy sauce to make the dish color more golden. Mix the sauce thoroughly with the ingredients so the flavors burn in. Now throw in the remainder of the colorful chilies. Mix again with other ingredients. This is to keep still some light green and red color in our dish, which is not browned by the dark soy sauce. Now, the second layer. Grind or add some white pepper. Half a teaspoon of vinegar. Around a quarter teaspoon of sugar. Stir them immediately with the ingredients. This will add a very subtle hint of sweet and sour flavor at the back of the dish to increase the depth of the flavors. The eggplants are getting softer and softer, and we come to our last layer of flavors. Add 2 tablespoons of rice liquor along the side of the pan. Let the ingredients sizzle in the rice liquor. It will stimulate a lot of nice aroma and smell, and also the rice liquor will remove the bloody smell which generally exists in meat. When the rice liquor is drying up a little bit, stir around. At last, some salt to taste, and sprinkle some coriander or spring onion onto the dish. Stir a bit and turn off the fire. Let's put the dish on a plate. Garnish with the rest of the coriander, and our dish is ready. This stir-fried dish is perfect to go with rice. The nice flavors of lard and garlic are all infused in the eggplant. Take a spoon and put it on top of the rice. Enjoy! Welcome back! We've made it to the last recipe of this course, beef stew with radish. We're going to take on the challenge to learn stewing, which is one of the more complicated techniques in Chinese cooking. We're going to cover a few new spices, which are great for meat stews. Once you got spices together, the cooking will be really straightforward. Let's kickstart the final challenge. What are the ingredients needed for the recipe? 350 grams of beef brisket. Beef brisket also contains a nice amount of beef tendon and fat. It is great for stewing or making soup. A whole radish, which is around 600 grams. 2 spring onions. 3 shallots. And a big piece of ginger of around 7 to 8 centimeters. Now let's have a look. What are the commonly used spices in Chinese stewing? The spices on the plate are what we're gonna use in today's recipe, and it's also a common combination for general meat stews in Chinese cooking. 5 to 6 pieces of star anise, 5 grams of fennel seeds. They both provide a sweet and licorice peppery flavor. Half of a small cinnamon. You probably see it a lot in apple pies and desserts, but in Chinese cooking, we actually use cinnamon more for a savory dish to provide a sweetness. 1 clove. It will offer a sweet bitterness into the dish. 2 pieces of bay leaf. They infuse a herbal bitterness to make the meat stew not so heavy. A few pieces of crushed nutmeg, or you can also use nutmeg powder. They provide a sweet nutty flavor. Around 3 grams of dried galanga. They are a root vegetable that has a really punchy smell. Take around 4 grams of Sichuan pepper. It gives a punch in the taste with its tingling features when you bite into them. Last but not least, some dried chilies if you want some spicy flavor in your stew. These may sound overwhelming to have so many spices all at once. It's also fine if you don't have all of them. Just take a few pieces that you like, combine them, and try it out. Because we have so many small pieces of spices and we don't want them to be lost everywhere in the stew, it's nice to take a small piece of clean cloth bag or a tea bag. I've put all the spices in except for the Sichuan pepper, dried chili, and the bay leaves. Close the cloth bag or the tea bag, and we will throw the whole bag into the stew later. Another nice to have ingredient is the rock sugar. It's less sweet and has a better coloring effect than normal sugar. But if you don't have it, then use normal sugar. In Chinese cooking, one of the essential steps before any meat stew is to pre-heat the meat, so that some remaining blood and dirty things stayed within the meat will come out, and also it removes the bloody and bad taste from the meat. Let's start treating the meat. First, cut the beef brisket into big chunks. Cut it against the meat grain, so it's easier to chew afterwards. Take the white part of the spring onion and cut them into big pieces. Take half of the ginger, remove the skin and cut them into slices. Now let's move to the stuff. Take a big pot, throw in the beef. Add cold water about 3 times the volume of the meat. Throw in the spring onion and the ginger that we just cut. Add 1 tablespoon of rice liquor. Turn on high heat and bring the water to boil. Normally after around 10 minutes, the water starts to be bubbling and a lot of dirty stuff starts to pop out and floating on the soup. Then take a filter and start fishing out all those dirty stuff. Keep the water boiling at the same time. We want to be really thorough in this process. As long as there are still dirty stuff coming out, we want to keep the water boiling and fish them out until you see that the soup pot is really clear and no dirty stuff coming out. It's time to fish out all the beef. Try to remove as much excess water as possible and leave the beef soup on the stove. We will use it later. Now we've managed the essential step to preheat the meat. Our beef brisket is clean for use. Now let's prepare the other ingredients. Cut off the head and tail of the radish. Peel off the skin. Cut the radish into really big blocks. You can try using the same cutting technique that I'm using. This keeps every radish block really big, so they will not fall apart during the long stewing process. And within every block, there is a different thickness, so with every bite of the radish later, you will enjoy a mix of different textures. Then the shallots. Again, peel off the skin and also cut them into big blocks, just like the radish. Peel off the skin of the remainder half of the ginger. Cut them into slices. For the green parts of the spring onion, tie a small knot, and we will use it for stewing, and they will not fall apart later. Now all ingredients are prepared. Let's fire up. Take a stew pot. I'm using a cast iron pot because it can maximally keep the warmth and moisture within the pot. Turn on high heat. Wait until the pot is hot. Pour in some oil that's enough to cover the bottom of the pot. Switch to low to medium fire. Now throw in the rock sugar. Stir it around to let it slowly melt in the oil. If you don't have rock sugar, you can add a teaspoon of normal sugar instead. When the sugar starts to melt, you can see that the oil is turning a bit sticky and caramelized. Using this caramelized mix of oil and sugar, we can give the beef brisket a nice coating of golden color. Stay in medium heat and throw in the beef brisket. Stir them around so every side is covered with the caramelized sugar, and you will see your beef brisket is turning a bit golden. Now throw in the shallots and a few pieces of ginger. Stir fry them together until you smell the shallots flavor coming out and it's also getting a bit softer. We can start the flavoring. 3 tablespoons of light soy sauce. 1 tablespoon of dark soy sauce and half a teaspoon of vinegar. Mix the sauce well with the beef. Now the beef is having a much darker color. Throw in the Sichuan pepper and dried chilies. The Sichuan pepper and dried chilies will give out more flavors after some frying. After some stir frying, let's pour in 3 tablespoons of rice liquor along the side of the pot. Now the process of stir fry and basic flavoring is finished. Let's start the stewing. Remember the beef soup that we kept earlier. Bring it to boil or at least very hot. Pour the soup into our stewing pot. The soup should be at least twice the volume as the beef mix. Bring the pot to boil. Throw in the knotted spring onions and our little bag of spices. Throw in the bay leaves. Make sure they're soaked in the soup. Now close the lid and move the pot to very low fire and stew it for an hour. After 1 hour, open the lid. Let's check out how our beef is doing. First, check there's still enough water in the pot, that the beef is not hanging out to dry. Then, throw in the radish. Mix it well, close the lid, and stew for another hour. Look at this pot of beef stew with radish with golden color. The beef brisket is thoroughly cooked. It breaks down with just 1 bite, and the radish is soaked with the sauce and beef flavor. Garnish the beef stew with some spring onion, chives, or coriander to give the stew a nice color and some freshness. Fish out the spice bags, the bay leaves, and the spring onion knot, and our stew is ready. Congratulations, you finished your final recipe of the course. Enjoy the stew! Congratulations on finishing the course! I hope you get a lot of value from it and had fun cooking Chinese food. If you are wondering, now what? After finishing the lectures, I strongly recommend you to start practicing. You can always post your questions in the Q&A section of this course, and I will try my best to answer it timely. If you like my course, please give a rating, leave a review, and recommend it to your friends. And if you're longing for more Chinese cooking recipes and interesting Chinese culture, please visit and follow my website at truetasteofchina.com. I'm posting more recipes and contents there day by day. Enjoy cooking and see you around!